It's issued a profit warning and halted the share buyback. And this comes as it's seen a surge of claims due to the virus, as we've seen, some events, some big events around the world cancelled. So if we have a look at its shares, let's see, have a look what they're doing. Open here. Yeah, but on the plus side, it said that it's keeping its dividend proposal, so that might be a kind of positive in this situation.
That's the way it would look, yes. Thanks very much indeed, Kit Rees there, with stocks to watch this morning. Naira.
Roger, let's get to our top stories. And the number of coronavirus cases globally continues to climb, with the latest Johns Hopkins tally recording nearly 860,000 infections and more than 42,000 deaths. Let's get to our global coverage. We're already starting on the global coverage. In the UK, top officials now accept the country hasn't done enough to test for coronavirus. The Prime Minister's team is blaming a shortage of chemical components. Experts are struggling to agree on what to do next. Nearly 400 more people have died after contracting the virus in the UK. The increase is twice as big as the rise announced Monday. Cabinet Officer Minister Michael Gove told reporters the jump in deaths reinforces the needs for social distancing measures.
The increase in the number of deaths is deeply shocking, disturbing, moving. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that people maintain the social distancing measures in order to improve and increase the resilience of the NHS.
Health Service Medical Director Stephen Powers said the next 2 weeks will be critical, but there are signs the pace of infections is slowing.
Well, let's turn to Italy, where the number of new coronavirus cases levelled off. That hit a new 2-week low. An official says the nation has reached a plateau. It's a sign the outbreak in Europe's epicentre may finally be coming under control. But Spain suffered its deadliest day yet, as well as a record number of deaths now in France. And let's go to the US, where President Donald Trump is warning of pain ahead. At a White House briefing on Tuesday, he said the nation's strength will be tested.
Hopefully, as the experts are predicting, as I think a lot of us are predicting after having studied it so hard, we're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel. But this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks.
Public health officials had revealed an estimate that as many as 240,000 Americans could die from coronavirus. Deaths in New York City are now over 1,000, and confirmed coronavirus cases in New York State overtook those in China's Hubei province, which is, of course, where the outbreak began.
And staying with the US, the White House is set to announce the deferral of some tariff payments. We've learned that President Trump has approved a proposal to delay some of the levies for 3 months. The executive order could come as soon as this week. It would not apply to tariffs the White House imposed as a result of enforcement actions, such as on Chinese goods or steel and aluminium from around the world.
Shares in HSBC and Standard Chartered have plunged in Hong Kong trading after the bank suspended their dividends. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
HSBC warned that revenue and loan losses would be impaired in the first quarter. It canceled an interim dividend slated for the end of this month. No payouts or any buybacks, it said, until at least the end of this year. Other banks followed suit after being urged to do so by UK regulators. Standard Chartered was one. Today it also suspended dividends and a buyback plan. Both stocks hammered during the Asian trading session. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
British lenders also scrapped their dividends to retain capital. Barclays cancelled a payment of more than £1 billion that was due to be distributed on Friday in response to a request from the UK's Prudential Regulation Authority. RBS and Banco Santander's UK unit made similar moves. Britain's 5 biggest banks had planned to pay out £7.5 billion in dividends over the next 2 months.
And as we mentioned at the beginning of the programme, 3 heavyweight investors have all come out with pessimistic comments on the markets in the face of the virus. Double Line's Jeffrey Gundlach says the S&P 500 won't match recent highs for a long time, and that projections of a quick recovery are too optimistic. Jim Rogers, who's chairman of Rogers Holdings, says another route's imminent because of the triple whammy of the virus damage to the economy, high debt levels and low interest rates that will be painful when they rise. And Oaktree Capital co-founder Howard Marks expects asset prices to extend their declines. He says the recent market rebound doesn't account for how much worse the fallout from the outbreak could get.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. In Italy, the number of new coronavirus cases leveled off, hitting a 2-week low. But a mystery remains as to how a country with 60 million people has had more deaths than any other nation in the world. The Italian Health Ministry says one possible answer lies in the low of flu deaths in 2019 and 2020. Before the corona outbreak, flu mortality among the elderly was below average, which made the group more vulnerable when the current pandemic did indeed hit. Now let's cross over to France, the third hardest hit country in Europe. About 500 people died yesterday from coronavirus, but the effects of the lockdown should finally become visible by the end of this week, with officials hope fewer hospital admissions. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum reports.
These numbers will help the government assess the efficiency of the lockdown. For now, it's unclear when confinement will actually end. In eastern France, there's so many patients in need of intensive care that they're being shipped to other French regions and also to neighboring countries. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And here in the UK, a 13-year-old boy from Brixton in South London who tested positive for coronavirus has now died. Ismail Mohammed Abdul Wahab died in King's College Hospital. That was on Monday. He is thought to be the youngest person to have died from coronavirus in this country. According to his family, he had no apparent underlying health conditions and tested positive for COVID-19 on Friday, a day after he was admitted to hospital. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, coming up, we'll talk more about the markets. We start off April in the red with the Stock 600 down 2.8%. We're also seeing US futures move lower. All of the three major benchmarks futures on those lower by more than 2%. The 10-year Treasury yield slipping as well in today's session. Up next, we'll talk about European banks as many of them scrap their dividends. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Aslinda Amin.
Let's bring in Manpower Minister Josephine Teo. Minister Teo, what kind of job losses are you looking at this year, bearing in mind that a recession is looming?
If our measures work, we certainly hope to minimize retrenchments. If you look at the way in which our budgets have been packaged, a lot of the help goes towards the employers, and we have a long-standing philosophy where what we really want to do is rally everyone together. Instead of cutting jobs to save costs, really we should be cutting costs to save jobs.
are foreign workers at risk? I mean, some companies are worried that they won't be able to hire enough foreign workers.
Well, we are in a rather unusual situation because so what we are noticing is that whereas in a normal year you might have more cancellations of work passes on a regular basis, I think companies are re-evaluating their positions. Instead of asking their existing employees to go, whether they are local or they are foreign, they might implement measures to try and keep these workers for a bit longer until the situation stabilizes and they have a better sense of what to expect.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, we're kicking off April in the red with the stock 600 sliding 2.9%, the FTSE down 3.4% and the DAX down 3.2% in Frankfurt. It follows a down day in Asian stocks where PMIs across most of the region showed contraction. And speaking of those PMIs, we've just gotten manufacturing data out of Spain showing that it slowed to 45.7 in March. That's down from 50.4 in February. So a contraction for Spanish manufacturing there. Now, if we look at some of the stock specific, Munich Re has slumped after pulling its guidance, currently down 3.8%. Continental similarly down 6.4% after dropping its outlook. We're also seeing HSBC and Standard Chartered significantly lower. It follows drops in their Hong Kong trading as well after they suspended dividend payments. Now, US futures are also sliding this morning. This as President Trump is warning of a painful 2 weeks ahead for the US as it grapples with the coronavirus. That is why we are seeing US Treasuries gaining across the curve. The 10-year yield sliding 8 basis points to 59 basis points. 10-year bund yields down 5 basis points, negative 52. 10-year gilt yields down 6 basis points at 29 basis points. The dollar is advancing on investor demand. Of course, the new quarter is kicking off, currently up 0.5%. The yen is holding at 107.6. The Kiwi selling off, though, on concerns over government debt, currently down 0.8%. Sterling and the euro both weak. Sterling down 0.6% at 123. Finally, in commodities, oil fluctuating around $20 a barrel after wrapping up its worst quarter on record. WTI now at $20.47 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Dan Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. According to researchers here in the UK, a loss of smell or taste may be a sign that you have coronavirus. A team at King's College London looked at responses from more than 400,000 people reporting suspected symptoms to an app. But the loss of smell and taste are also signs of other respiratory infections, such as a common cold. Experts say fever and cough remain the most important symptoms to look out for and act upon. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has appealed to younger people to take the nation's lockdown seriously. She says that while potentially not suffering the worst symptoms of coronavirus, 20 to 29-year-olds are the key group transmitting the disease. The country now has 708 confirmed cases of the virus and recorded its first death at the weekend. And confirmation the Wimbledon Championships will be cancelled for the very first time since the Second World War is indeed expected today. The All England club are in emergency meetings to discuss their response to the coronavirus pandemic. The competition is due to run for 2 weeks from the 29th of June. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, let's turn to banks where the dividend cuts continue as companies hoard cash and succumb to pressure from regulators. UK banks have been scrapping their plans for payouts and buybacks. The latest to do so include HSBC and Standard Chartered, with both slipping in Hong Kong trading earlier. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg Intelligence senior banks analyst Jonathan Tice. Jonathan, good to have you with us. How much have investors already discounted the prospect of dividend cuts at banks?
Well, if you look at the reaction of the Hong Kong shares, HSBC and Standard Chartered, they were down 9-10% today, which is a little bit of an anomaly because in most cases I think investors were very aware this was coming. But bear in mind, in Hong Kong you've got a very large retail investor base. So unfortunately, as the old adage goes about the retail investor being the last one in just before a sell-off, I don't think they were fully aware of kind of what was going on in terms of income from their bank stocks.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment, Jonathan, because in some ways, I mean, you could understand perhaps the banks being a little bit more perhaps bullish than they seem, given what may come as a result of this. The down the line, things may be rather better for them. But at the moment, it does look very, very bearish for this sector, and the pressures are very considerable.
Absolutely. I think the biggest issues we've got at the moment is we have absolutely no visibility on revenues, because we've seen rate cuts globally. We know activity's fallen off a cliff. We know that the regulators have stepped up and said, tell you what, this accounting rule we changed called IFRS 9, which after the last crisis meant before, when you see losses coming, you have to accrue for them in advance. The bad debt pain, the regulators have done everything they can to ease. But the issue you've still got is what on earth is the revenue stream going forward, all the fees. If mortgage activity stops, take the UK, take Hong Kong, you can't even go and view a property. I mean, there is a massive glut, and the pipeline will be down for months and months. So from a bank's perspective, the dividend cuts, the PRA has said, this isn't about capital really, because we're not doing this because we think you're going to erode your capital buffers. We're doing this because we need you to step back and wait and see what happens effectively.
So what happens next then, Jonathan? Bonus cuts, potentially job cuts?
Well, again, the PRA, I mean, we've written something this morning, or yesterday we wrote it, about the fact that they can't carry out a lot of the job cuts yet because it's totally unacceptable, and rightly, an awful lot of the banks, the HSBC's, Lloyds have said, you know what, the 35, 40,000 people we said we're going to cut, we're going to put on hold. But down the line, those cuts and more will have to come. So what does happen next is absolutely what the PRA has done today, which is no cash bonuses. Clearly, banks will be able to pay with deferred compensation, deferred promises, shares, etc. But I think what happens next is we have to wait for first and second quarter results, because it won't be this quarter, and bear in mind most banks report in the first quarter, to get any idea what they think the pipeline for revenue is. Because until they understand kind of what the revenue run rate looks like, they haven't got any idea what they need to adjust the cost base down to. And the one thing they can't do right now is sack people, so they have to attack the variable compensation base, which is bonuses.
All right, Jonathan, thanks very much indeed. Jonathan Tice there, Bloomberg Intelligence, senior banks analyst, reflecting on what has been a very difficult moment, the suspension of the dividends being a clear symptom of it, and the doubt that exists really in banks as to how the rest of the year is going to play out. But how are the markets playing out this morning, Nara?
Well, if we take a look at some of these bank stocks that we've been hearing from this morning, I mean, Barclays is down 4.9%. We heard from Jonathan about what a hit HSBC and Stand Chart shares took in the Hong Kong session. HSBC in London down 7.6%. Generally, we're also seeing a down day for markets after the worst quarter for global equities since the financial crisis. The Stock 600 is lower by 3.3%, so extending losses, and US futures also in the red. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street kicks off a new quarter with investors hoping they can leave the worst of the losses in the rearview mirror. The S&P had its worst quarter since the financial crisis, tumbling 20% since January 1st. The Dow was down more than 23%, the most since 1987. We're about to get a sense of how disastrous the coronavirus pandemic has been for car makers. An analyst at Edmunds says the whole world is turned upside down. The firm expects car sales for March to slow to a yearly rate of less than 12 million. That would be the worst reading in almost a decade. Apple is asking retail store employees to temporarily become remote tech support staff. That's irking some workers who thought they would be paid for simply staying home. Staffers you might otherwise see at the Genius Bar if Apple stores were open are instead becoming work-from-home Apple Care employees who answer customer service inquiries. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
EP, AI-powered cloud-native digital transformation. Hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies work with GEP to transform their procurement and supply chain operations. Why? GEP's unified digital platforms, smart, intuitive software that business users love, drive up adoption, user satisfaction, and productivity. GEP helps CIOs drive real digital transformation and achieve amazing results. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, we are awash in messages, but some messengers are more effective than others.
Ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. We need 30,000.
Meanwhile, some media outlets choose not to air the president's press briefings live, and media critics ponder what's the right balance between good information and all information. All that and more on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about.
Speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. News without analysis is like half a bridge.
Why is the debt to GDP ratio still so important?
Those things, once they're set in place, stay around for years.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, 30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe after the worst quarter for global equities since the financial crisis. We start April in the red. The Stock 600 down almost 3.5%. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 down almost 4%. Same for the CAC 40. The DAX lower by 3.5%. IBEX and FTSE MIB both lower by at least 2%. US futures also point to a weak open. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all lower by at least 2.5%. Investors seeming to take in the worsening figures on coronavirus cases out of the US. We did get a rebound in the Caixin manufacturing in China, but a worsening outlook for factories elsewhere in Asia. The 10-year Treasury yield is slipping 7 basis points now. We're below a 60 handle at 59 basis points. The 10-year Bund yield down 5 basis points to negative 52. The 10-year gilt yield dropped 6 basis points as well. So a definite risk-off tone across markets as well. That's also being reflected by a stronger dollar. You've got the Aussie, Canadian and Kiwi all underperforming against the greenback in today's session. Of course, we've got the repo lifeline from the Fed. Will that do anything to ease liquidity pressures? The Bloomberg Dollar Index up 0.6% after the best quarter since 2016 for the Bloomberg Dollar Index. And oil's been fluctuating a bit in today's session. Right now, you're seeing WTI down 0.5% at $37 a barrel. President Trump has talked about having conversations with Russia and Saudi Arabia, but it's really the demand side that's causing concern for investors. And in more evidence yet of risk off and bid for havens, gold up 1%, $1,594 an ounce. Roger.
Right, well, let's go on to some of today's top stories. US health officials estimate up to 240,000 Americans could die from coronavirus, and President Trump has warned of a tough 2 weeks ahead. Fatalities in New York City now are over 1,000. Italy's new infections leveled at a 2-week low. Globally, more than 859,000 people are infected, and there are at least 42,300 dead.
Here in the UK, top officials now accept the country hasn't done enough to test for coronavirus. The Prime Minister's team is blaming a shortage of chemical components, and experts are struggling to agree on what to do next. Meanwhile, the UK Health Department says the first new ventilators will be delivered to the NHS at the weekend.
HSBC and Standard Chartered shares plunged in Hong Kong this morning after they scrapped dividends and buybacks urged on by the UK regulator. Barclays cancelled a payment of more than £1 billion that was due to be distributed on Friday. RBS and Banco Santander's UK unit made similar moves. Britain's 5 biggest banks had planned to pay out £7.5 billion over the next 2 months.
And unsurprisingly, Roger, we are seeing shares in Barclays, in HSBC and RBS all lower in today's session. And David Einhorn's hedge funds plummeted 12% in March. The declines left Einhorn's Greenlight Capital with a loss of more than 21% this year. This comes at a challenging time for Einhorn. His value style of investing has been mostly out of sync with markets in recent years. And speaking of legendary investors, Roger, we've also had a trifecta of those investors come out today and signal warnings on markets. So you've got Double Line's Jeffrey Gundlach saying that the presumption of a V-shaped recovery is too optimistic. We haven't yet seen the bottom for the S&P 500. Oaktree's Howard Marks saying that investor pessimism is just waiting to rear its head. And Jim Rogers expecting the worst bear market of his lifetime in the next 2 years.
Certainly a lot of gloom out there. Well, let's catch up with the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. And Leanne, you start with the global picture of the virus.
Yes, Roger. Indeed, good morning. As the number of coronavirus cases globally continues to rise, with the latest Johns Hopkins tally recording more than 42,000 deaths. In Italy, the number of new coronavirus cases leveled off, hitting a 2-week low. But a mystery remains as to how a country with 60 million people has had more deaths than any other nation in the world. The Italian health ministry says one possible clue lies in the low flu deaths in 2019 and 2020. Before the coronavirus outbreak, flu mortality among the elderly was indeed below average, which made that group more vulnerable when the current pandemic did hit. In its latest attempt to try to protect Spaniards from the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic, the government has announced new rules. Bloomberg's Rodrigo Orihuela has the details.
that seek to protect renters from landlords by freezing rent and blocking evictions for 6 months. Tuesday marked the deadliest day since the outbreak started in Spain, with 838 fatalities in 24 hours, amid a countrywide lockdown that is already in its third week. Madrid, Rodrigo Orihuela, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, Denis Protsenko, the doctor who last week gave Russian President Vladimir Putin a tour of Moscow's main coronavirus hospital, has been diagnosed with the illness. Bloomberg's Jake Rudnitsky has more.
Putin, who wasn't wearing any protective gear when he met and shook hands with Protsenko, is regularly tested and is fine, according to a Kremlin spokesman. Protsenko has been the face of Moscow's battle with coronavirus for many Russians, thanks to his regular social media posts. In the weeks since his meeting with Putin, Moscow has gone on lockdown. In Moscow, Jake Rudnitsky, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And here in the UK, 70 pregnant women and mothers will be released from prison early to combat the coronavirus crisis. The Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, has given the plan the green light. The women are to be released within days after checks to ensure they do not pose a risk of harm to the public. Prison governors will be able to grant their release on temporary license. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you for that. Now, the US plans meetings with Russia and Saudi Arabia to try to staunch an historic plunge in oil prices. The commodity had its worst ever quarter amid a double whammy of virus restrictions eroding demand and a damaging war for market share between Riyadh and Moscow. And further volatility to be expected from today as OPEC plus output curbs end. Indeed, it's they can drill as much as they want. Current price, just to give you, is WTI 20.38 right now. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horden. Anne-Marie, good morning. Thanks for being with us. Now, give us a sense of where this is now. We've been talking about oil prices for quite a while, it seems, but is there any sign of an end or a bottom to this dispute?
No, quite the opposite, actually, Roger, and good morning. The world is literally running out of space to put this surplus that we have. And today marks the day that that historic deal struck in 2016 between Riyadh and Moscow coming to the end. These massive producers can pump at will, but where does it all go? IHS is talking about, and a lot of consultants are talking about, that supply may exceed demand by more than 12 million barrels a day in the second quarter. So unless something is done, and even if something is done, what Jeff Curry was talking about yesterday, there still is serious demand destruction, and that's what we're coming up against. Vitol CEO told me last week he's seeing as much as 20 million barrels a day coming off the market. Goldman Sachs was talking about 26 million barrels a day this week they've seen as towns are quarantined, flights are grounded. That's about shutting China off twice. That's 0.25% of the world's oil demand, so it's serious weakness on the demand side.
Yeah, and Anne-Marie, that's the point Goldman is making, isn't it? That even if there was any agreement to cut output, it's likely too late. It would fall short of the loss in consumption. And meanwhile, you've got industry analysts talking about a potentially apocalyptic April. What do they mean when they say apocalyptic April? I mean, are negative oil prices on the cards at all?
I think you could see negative, and we have seen this in one obscure place for the market in the United States, when you're talking about physical barrels. So when you're looking at WTI and Brent on your terminal, you're looking at these spot future prices, right? But actually in the market, when you're looking at physical prices, we're seeing some oil trade for under $10 a barrel. And that's already, we're seeing in the United States, hit the gasoline stations. In some cities, you're seeing gasoline under $1. That's what President Trump was talking about yesterday. He was saying how some places you're seeing 99 cents. And apocalyptic really for April's because we're having this surge of supply, and at the same time, the storage capacity is filling up. We're weeks, months away from being, top level on storage around the world.
So when do we start seeing US shale companies start to fold? Because there has to be a big problem for them.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've already seen a number of them either be cut by like S&P or Fitch, and as well as a lot of them talking about indirectly the changes they're going to have to make. Like Vicky Holub at Occidental was talking about serious changes, kind of insinuating potentially job cuts. That's what this industry is coming up against. It is going to, this supply war and demand destruction is basically claiming shale as a massive victim. And you're already hearing it from the Texas commissioners and also the pipeline companies that are saying to producers, you need to ratchet back some of this production because we cannot hold it anymore. There is no more space.
Anne-Marie Hordern, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. And we've also seen Italy and Spain pointing to the staggering oil demand hit from COVID-19. Their oil demand has collapsed amid nationwide lockdowns. Both those countries, of course, in Europe having been among the hardest hit by the coronavirus. Roger, up next, we will talk more about Europe and global markets with David Owen, Chief European Economist at Jefferies. He joins us next. Meanwhile, we are kicking off April in the red for global equities. US futures pointing to a down day in the US session. The Stock 600 down 3.4%. This is Bloomberg.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high.
Tonight, it's a Lotto triple rollover. Don't miss out. Play your numbers online or on the app today. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over. This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
On this week's On the Media, we are awash in messages, but some messengers are more effective than others.
Ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. We need 30,000.
Meanwhile, some media outlets choose not to air the president's press briefings live, and media critics ponder what's the right balance between good information and all information. All that and more on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk Is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Let me pick up with a business flash there. At the moment, European markets just 3/4 of an hour into the trading session. Stock 600 down 3.4%, FTSE 100 down 4.2%, the CAC down 4.3%, and the DAX down 3.8%, the IBEX down 2.6%. So very much a risk-off mood there. And looking to the US opening, S&P E-mini down 3.4%, Dow down 3.4%, and the NASDAQ down almost 3%. So the risk-off mood certainly spreading around. Looking at oil, we are keeping an eye on that, of course, given the difficulties that oil has had in the last quarter. WTI currently 20.26, that's down 1%. Brent crude is at $25.19 the barrel. Now looking across to the bond space, US 10-year treasuries on 0.6 is the handle, and also keeping an eye on the Bund, which is negative 0.5, and you looking at gilts too, which is at 0.29 basis points, to where we find that at the moment. Also keeping an eye on the dollar, Bloomberg dollar actually gaining a bit, 0.6%, 1254.56, and also looking at the pound cable, 1.235, that's down 0.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, thank you. Let's start here in the UK. A 13-year-old boy from Brixton in South London who tested positive for coronavirus has now died. Ismail Mohammed Abdul Wahab died in King College Hospital on Monday. He's thought to be the youngest person to have died from coronavirus in the country. According to his family, he had no apparent underlying health conditions. Now, the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has addressed the nation in an effort to calm political tensions, shifting gears to assure Brazilians that his main concern was always to save lives. The president is calling for a unified effort by the federal government, states, Congress and society in the fight against coronavirus. Bolsonaro recently referred to the virus as a little flu. And Australia's government will help charter hundreds of planes full of products such as rock lobster, beef and dairy to key markets, including China and Japan. That's after the coronavirus pandemic led to the cancellation of most commercial flights that usually carry fresh produce. The government will provide $68 million to get Australian products to key markets. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Let's get back to the markets. And David Owen, Chief European Economist at Jefferies, joins us now down the line. David, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We wake up this morning to a clarion call from three legendary investors, Double Line's Jeffrey Gundlach, Oaktree's Howard Marks, and veteran investor Jim Rogers, all saying that the worst is not over for equities, and Gundlach at least saying that the V-shaped recovery that seems to be the assumption here is a little too optimistic. Is it time to stop forecasting a V-shaped recovery and a rebound in the global economy in the second half?
I don't think so, but I'd be very cautious about what we see over the next few weeks. I mean, we came up with this thesis a few weeks ago that GDP could certainly decline by 15% in the second quarter in much of Europe, and potentially by more in Italy. And of course, to put it in context, we're talking here numbers of 60% annualized in the way that people look at things in the US. So, and those sorts of numbers at the time were highly, highly unusual. And, we're seeing now those sorts of numbers doing the rounds, being quoted and so forth. The issue is, though, that we don't really know how bad it's going to be. And we've had economists like Simon Wren Lewis, who is based in Oxford, who did some original work on pandemics and the hits to GDP, saying that actually the hits in the second quarter could be even worse, 30-40% off GDP. Now, I don't think it's going to be quite that bad, but the point is it's going to be really bad, and we haven't got the figures coming through yet. The data is obviously lagging. We had some comfort from the Chinese PMIs yesterday and today that they have shown a recovery, but China is still operating well below potential, and we don't know yet how much GDP in China actually fell in the first quarter. The other point I'd make is that we don't quite know yet how long these shutdowns are going to last for. So initially people were thinking, well, the shutdowns will last for maybe 3-4 weeks, and then everything will get back to normal, and you get a strong bounce coming back through. Now there's more concern that these shutdowns will persist into the second quarter, second quarter, potentially into the beginning of the third quarter.
Exactly.
And there's also concern that we could see a second wave. So I'd be very cautious at this point, calling the bottom and everything.
So, David, just talking about the problems that ensue in the middle of all this, I mean, one of the big problems has been liquidity. With all the action that there has been from governments and central banks, liquidity perhaps not so much of a problem now. Are there ways in which what the governments and central banks have done is beginning to have a material effect on confidence, apart from anything else?
Well, no, I think absolutely. I think I can look at the examples in many countries. We've had a very joined up monetary and fiscal response. The fiscal response has been very targeted, help for companies, credit lines, guarantees, loan guarantees, and so forth. Furloughing workers, I think, here in the UK and giving them 80% of their salary up to a cap, to me, is entirely sensible and will cushion the blow in terms of unemployment going forward. But certain companies will not be able to access this that quickly. Certain companies, obviously, unfortunately, will go bust. And what we don't know is the extent of this. So we're going to be following this very closely for obvious reasons, but we've never been here before. And the concern of all policymakers is, even though they're throwing as much as they possibly can at the issue, they can't cushion the blow to GDP and the blow to certain companies coming through over the next few weeks, particularly if these shutdowns persist on medical grounds. And if also we get a second wave later in the year, once shutdowns come to an end. So all these things have to be going to that mix.
Exactly, and that's what's led certain people to actually expect potentially a double dip recession or even a depression, David. But to look at labour markets, what's been really interesting is to see the different responses in the US versus Europe based on the different labour market dynamics. The US's traditionally more flexible labour market means individual workers have sort of been expected to take the brunt, so you're getting those cash handouts for households in the stimulus plan. But in Europe, states tend to provide more generous unemployment benefits. It's harder to fire staff. The focus has been on giving companies incentives to keep workers on their books and kind of holding out for business to return to normal as soon as possible. When you look at those differences, is there any prediction to be made for which labour market might bounce back more vigorously if and when that eventually comes?
Well, that's a really good question. And again, we won't know the answer until we get through this. So, for example, here in the UK, we know that the hit to the UK unemployment is going to be a lot less than the US, unfortunately, is going to see, in a way that the government is underwriting 80% of salaries by subscribing for many employees up to a cap. And that will mean that people basically return to work once, hopefully, this is all over in a few weeks' time. The point, though, is company business models will have to adapt to a new world going forward. And some companies may find, as we go into 2021, what they thought was profitable is no longer profitable. So we may actually see the impact on the UK labour market actually, occurring later. Whereas in the US, obviously the hit is much more immediate. Now, here in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, we're seeing companies under enormous pressure really to cut dividends, and the banking sector being one of those. to preserve cash. So again, that's another sort of twist in this tale. But at the end of the day, the longer this goes on for, the more companies lose cash, the more issues we're going to have down the line. But, this has all been done, obviously, for medical reasons, and you can understand the problem that all the policymakers have in trying to move as quickly as possible. What I'd also say, though, is that in contrast to what we saw in the financial crisis, the money supply is accelerating. So in the financial crisis, the money supply was in danger of collapsing, whereas right now the money supply is accelerating. And we have this very interesting notion of government debt rising dramatically in some countries, and in some countries, central banks basically buying the paper through an enhanced QE program. And the money supply in that story will actually continue accelerating probably. So that may lead to higher inflation down the line, not for this year, but potentially in 2021, 2022, which again, markets have to focus on.
Well, I was going to pick up on that, looking perhaps to the longer future. I mean, you talked about a new world. I mean, is it possible to see what shape the new world might have after this? Because a lot of people are saying a lot of fundamentals are going to change.
Well, I think they will, and I think also, the way business operates and, how businesses, we can see it here in the UK, how business leaders have adapted to what's happening, how they've made statements publicly. That's had an impact on their reputation, and then that will change. And then we've got the climate issue as well, and we know that climate change will lead to higher risk of pandemics going forward. So I think there'll be more pressure to change the way lots of things work. But for certain businesses, obviously, we're all finding we can work remotely. There's going to be more of that, particularly in areas like the service sector. So, again, companies will change.
David Owen, Chief European Economist at Jefferies. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And we kick off April, Roger, an hour into the equity market open with losses on the Stock 600. We're down 2.9% following the worst quarter for global equities since the financial crisis. US futures extending losses, S&P E-minis and Dow futures down more than 3%. The 10-year Treasury yield earlier dropped below a 60 handle. We're now at 62 basis points, down 5 basis points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Hiya, it's Mel B. I'm just calling to say whether you're searching for a babe, a boo, or a bit of fun, there's one B you can always rely on. Badoo, the dating app which matches you with people based on your interests. Now more than ever, we want to be connected. You're more than just a photo, so be your true self and connect with a like-minded community. There's a new B in town. Download the Badoo app today. Badoo, date honestly.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. Now it's underway. Cover. Rowan. Wait a second.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the Tune In podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building.
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else.
I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hebke.
And a good morning from our Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Matt, I look out the window, blue skies, but it's really hard to be optimistic at the moment, isn't it? Obviously, given the health crisis that we're going through with numbers rising and also with the markets in such turmoil. I want to bring you up to speed very briefly with the figures that we have at the moment. So in terms of the European equity markets, we're down by 2.8% on the US stock 600, the biggest declining sector being banks, dropping 4.8% right now. This after global equities had the worst quarter since 2008, and European equities the biggest quarterly loss since 2002. And after also we had Japan seeing a significant drop in equity markets overnight. In terms of the bond markets right now, I'll just bring you an update. The Fed stepped in this morning again with help for foreign central banks with repo offers. We traded 62 basis points for US benchmark yield, so dropping 5 basis points. Similarly, in Germany, we're at negative 51 basis points, so also down 4 basis points at the moment. Italian BTP is at 1.53% right now. And also don't forget the oil markets. Obviously, we are very close still to $20 a barrel for WTI and Brent crude futures. Last quarter, Brent hit the lowest level since 2002. And now we have OPEC countries free to pump as of today. So that's a little look at the markets.
Yeah, very fascinating developments in markets. I think a lot of it driven by the kind of reassessment that we've got in the U.S. with more deaths expected now. The official expectations are for 240,000 overall. And also, it's interesting that markets don't seem to be pricing in such a huge drop in earnings. If you look at the S&P 500 right now, it's still valuing stocks at about 17 times earnings, and that equates to only an earnings drop of 4 or 5%. Let's get out to Chris Wiley right now. He's the CIO at Connor Broadley Wealth Management, and he joins us. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. Chris, thanks for sticking around. Let me ask what you expect in terms of the effect of the sudden stop that we're seeing in the global economy on earnings going forward.
Yes, well, I was looking at the numbers yesterday, which are indicating that for the current year, analysts have penciled in 8% drop in earnings for the S&P, which even take into account the fact that technology, healthcare sectors will be pretty robust, or at least some of those stocks will be. It seems pretty modest. And I think when you look outside of the States into Europe, there's been perhaps a slightly more realistic attempt to price in the downside. I think one of the things which might surprise people actually is if in sectors which are assumed to be robust, such as information technology, if it's not consistently robust. Now you can imagine how Microsoft, for instance, probably will be, could even be a beneficiary of the current situation. We're all getting familiar with their products right now, working from home, if we weren't before. But if you consider other technology leaders, Google, for instance, which are highly reliant on advertising revenues, and we all know what's happening in the advertising space at the moment. So just because something's a technology company does not mean it doesn't have cyclical earnings.
Yeah.
So you could see that all playing out in the coming quarters.
Yeah, indeed. So then, is it any surprise when it comes to the data that's just hit this morning in terms of the manufacturing PMI numbers? In Germany for March, 45.4, Spain 45.7, Italy 40.3, France 43.2. I mean, these are indicators of, I guess, what we know, right, of the deep stall in terms of production. Is it any surprise to you?
I don't think it's a surprise at all. I don't know how you come up with forecasts for these numbers at the moment. You can kind of make them up, can't you? We know that, we're in lockdown. You can't say more than that. In fact, in some ways, I'm surprised they're not worse. The question will be, can the markets absorb this news? And it seemed to feel last week, at least, that the market had got that. So yes, we know these are going to be terrible numbers, but what multiplier do we put on them? Looking through them to what comes next. And the concern is that actually at the moment we're not putting enough of a multiplier on it, and that this is going to last a fair deal longer. On the other side of that, I think there's a reasonable chance that a corner is being turned in terms of the immediate case history for
of the virus, coming back to what started all of this. It's looking increasingly like an inflection point in Italy, and that's important because it establishes a case study for lockdown in Western democracies. We've had one in China. We know it worked there, but we haven't been sure it will work in the West. And there's increasing evidence that actually it is effective here. And if we can extend that, then you can start to think about where we get to in a month or two down the line in Western economies and how we start to move to the next phase, which is the exit from lockdown. But we know that this is going to be with us for quite a while. Markets are trying to resolve these conflicting forces of complete standstill in terms of the functioning of the economy, but with policy which is being applied in huge scale preemptively in anticipation of that. I don't think anyone quite knows how that's going to play out. I think the risks in the next few weeks could see this relief rally consolidate and maybe push on, if I'm right about the case history. But I would probably fade that because I think these economic issues are going to continue to reverberate over the next 3 to 6 months. But getting towards the end of the year, if we're lucky, we'll get the consumer emerging from the trenches and policy really beginning to kick in. And let's not forget that cheap money, huge liquidity, has implications for asset prices. It always has in the past. So at multiples, we started off talking about multiples. Well, technically, these higher multiples are justified by the return to zero interest rate policy around the world
and beyond.
So I don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of moving parts in this at the moment, and I think we're all going to have to stay agile.
I hope it doesn't take 3 to 6 months. I just dream about getting back to the pub. All I want is an extra cold pint.
Don't tell me, Pim.
Hanging around the lads, but I drink at home like a hero right now because I want to save lives.
All I'm going to say is I was filling the recycling bin last night, and I hope nobody was watching what was going into it.
Chris, what do you think about? You talk about the stimulus or rates and all of these relief packages that we see from governments around the world. Are there countries that you think are doing, a really good job? Are there countries where you think that's a model, that's what we should all be doing? And as a result, that's where, I want to be invested when the time comes to get back in.
Yeah, well, I think things have really changed this time around. Actually, it's hard to imagine the states doing a lot more than they've done at this stage. We've just taken an enormous leap, haven't we, in the course of a month? Totally readjusted our sights. In the old days, it always used to be, you'd look at China for shock and awe policies, but you're getting more of that from the States at the moment. Frankly, at the UK, I think deserves a bit of credit in terms of the complete about turn. They seem to start off with an attitude of protecting the economy at all costs to adopting a lockdown and very aggressive policies. We were touching earlier, weren't we, on the question of inflation and inflationary impetus and the worry about whether these policies, which are getting really close to central bank financing, deficit spending, whether that will be inflationary. I think the answer is not in the short term because of energy prices collapsing. But in the longer term, quite possibly. This could be the end of the bond super cycle of the last 25, 30 years.
That's a call. That's a bold call, Chris.
It's been the Widowmaker, hasn't it, that one?
Yeah.
I think the markets are going to be extremely volatile. I doubt we've seen a bottom. Have we seen the bottom? I really don't know. The best we could probably hope for is a complicated bottom formation in the next few months. So a lot of volatility. But looking into next year, I would also not discount a recovery which could surprise people if you get a combination of a return of consumer confidence, some savings which have been built up involuntarily during this period beginning to be deployed just as this liquidity wave really hits. Then you could see quite a recovery coming through, and with asset prices impacted by continued zero interest rate policy, and eventually, yes, an inflationary impetus. And let's not forget the oil price being floored right now, production being taken out, have no impact at the moment, but in future years, as the recovery takes place and you've got declining production, you could see the oil price turning on its head, and actually that at that point providing an inflationary impetus.
Yeah, does it wipe out renewables? What about the push for green? I mean, there are so many big questions that could come out of this. Thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg Radio and television today. That was Chris Wiley, who is the CIO at Connor Broadley Wealth Management. Really good to speak to you.
Yeah, let's get over to Leanne Gerrans now with your world national news headlines. Leanne?
Matt, good morning. As the number of coronavirus cases globally continues to rise, with the latest Johns Hopkins tally recording more than 42,000 deaths. Let's turn to Italy, where the number of new coronavirus cases leveled off, hitting a 2-week low. An official says the nation has reached a plateau. It's a sign the outbreak in Europe's epicenter may finally be coming under control. But Spain suffered its deadliest day yet. Let's cross over to France, the third hardest hit country in Europe. About 500 people died yesterday from coronavirus. That's a record number. But the effects of the lockdown should finally become visible by the end of this week, with officials hope fewer hospital admissions. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum reports.
These numbers will help the government assess the efficiency of the lockdown. For now, it's unclear when confinement will actually end. In eastern France, there's so many patients in need of intensive care that they're being shipped to other French regions and also to neighboring countries. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Top officials in the UK now accept the country hasn't done enough to test for coronavirus. The Prime Minister's team is blaming a shortage of chemical components, and experts are struggling to agree on what to do next. Meanwhile, the UK Health Department says the first new ventilators will be delivered to the NHS at the weekend. And the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reiterated that there's no need to declare an emergency now as coronavirus cases grow, particularly in Tokyo. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds says Japan is relying on a generally obedient public to stay at home when asked to do so.
He spoke after one of the government's own expert advisors warned earlier this week that waiting until there's an explosive surge in infections would be leaving it too late. Speaking in a parliamentary committee, Abe also underscored that there was no possibility of a French-style lockdown in the Japanese capital. Civil liberties enshrined in Japan's post-war constitution mean the government cannot send police to clear people off the streets. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much. Leanne Gerrans with the world news. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Bloomberg Opinions. Alex Webb will be joining us next. We can talk about coronavirus isolation boosting demand for Amazon deliveries as calls to protect their workers grow. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO. Act innovative fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes, with early diagnosis, pre-diabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners. Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Aslinda Amin.
Let's bring in Manpower Minister Josephine Teo. Minister Teo, what kind of job losses are you looking at this year, bearing in mind that a recession is looming?
If our measures work, we certainly hope to minimize retrenchments. If you look at the way in which our budgets have been packaged, a lot of the help goes towards the employers, and we have a long-standing philosophy where what we really want to do is rally everyone together. Instead of cutting jobs to save costs, really we should be cutting costs to save jobs.
Are foreign workers at risk? I mean, some companies are worried that they won't be able to hire enough foreign workers.
Well, we are in a rather unusual situation because so what we are noticing is that whereas in a normal year you might have more cancellations of work passes on a regular basis, I think companies are re-evaluating their positions. Instead of asking their existing employees to go, whether they are local or they are foreign, they might implement measures to try and keep these workers for a bit longer until the situation stabilizes and they have a better sense of what to expect.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Customers badly.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Welcome to the second quarter. The first quarter is behind us, and what a quarter it was. Volatility everywhere you looked. Yesterday, the S&P 500 ended the quarter down exactly 20%. Today in the United States, futures are lower this morning, and in Europe, every major indice is down. The Stoxx 600 is down 2.5%. We're seeing a lot of pressure as well on banks. HSBC down more than 8%. Standard Chartered down more than 8% as well. This comes as they are halting dividends and share buybacks after being really pressured and urged by the regulators. This morning, what else are we seeing across assets? We are seeing a stronger U.S. dollar. The first quarter, really, the dollar was king. It was a standout. People were making margin calls. They were hoarding cash. It is up 0.6% today in the Bloomberg Dollar Index. And then across the bonds, we are seeing the 10-year yield, money rushing into yields this morning, go down 4.7 basis points, 0.622% on the 10-year yield. It was a quarter where the Fed cut 150 basis points off its target rate. And in commodities this morning, Brent crude is trading at $25 a barrel. April is really going to be seismic for the market. We're seeing serious demand destruction. At the same time, the OPEC deal ends today that was struck in 2016. Saudi and Russia can pump at will. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Let's start here in the UK. A 13-year-old boy from Brixton in South London who tested positive for coronavirus has died. Ismail Mohammed Abdul Wahab died in King's College Hospital on Monday. He's thought to be the youngest person to have died from coronavirus in the country. According to his family, he had no apparent underlying health conditions. Now, according to researchers also here in the UK, a loss of smell or taste may be a sign that you have coronavirus. A team at King's College London looked at responses from more than 400,000 people reporting suspected symptoms to an app. But the loss of smell and taste also signs that you have other respiratory infections such as a common cold. Experts say fever and cough remain the most important symptoms to look out for and act upon. And New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has appealed to younger people to take the nation's lockdown seriously. She says that while potentially not suffering the worst symptoms of the virus, 29 to 20-year-olds are the key group transmitting the disease. The country now has 708 confirmed cases of the virus and recorded its first death at the weekend. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Alex Webb, who's writing about the surge in Amazon deliveries amid the coronavirus crisis and how this should prompt the company to better protect its workers. And a little disclosure here, Alex. I don't know how bad the shutdown is where you are. Here in Germany, if we didn't have Amazon, my dog and I would both have starved by now because they deliver everything we need to my house.
I mean, I've actually been kind of trying to limit Amazon delivery simply because, up to a point, we're exposing people to come and deliver stuff to us, and I don't need to do that to get a yoga mat. I can survive without that sort of thing.
Well, but here there have been food shortages. You couldn't get paper products. There was no. You couldn't buy loaves of bread at grocery stores, so there was no other choice.
Certainly the experience in the UK is that if you can't get it in stores, you couldn't get it on Amazon either. And the stuff that you needed, ultimately, they had it when you needed it. There were a few days when shelves were selling out immediately, but ultimately they filled up within a few days, and then the panic buying seemed largely unfounded.
So then what's the story then about you mentioned protecting workers. I mean, this is something that I've read now across the retail sector, isn't it? Here in the UK, we had the argument around Sports Direct, who had to apologise for getting their workers to work. Walmart, the same issue. What is the pressure now on Amazon?
I think the issue we're seeing here is that there are a lot of people striking at Amazon around the place. I mean, okay, a small strike in the US, but then there's been Italy. We've seen, lawmakers in France say that Amazon needs to do more to protect its workers because there are complaints about, the extent to which they are, cleaning and sanitizing facilities if there is a confirmed case there, and that they're not getting enough, sanitizing wipes and face masks, things like that. Now, ultimately, the point that I think is worth raising is not necessarily that Amazon is particularly worse than anyone else right now, but that when we order something and it appears the next day, broadly speaking, we don't ask ourselves, how does that happen? We don't ask ourselves, who is making that happen? We tend to assume, there's some clever automation, there are robots packing all the stuff for us. That's not the case. Amazon employs almost 800,000 people around the world. It's adding another 100,000 to deal with this crisis. Those people often are not brilliantly paid. They work under quite high stress conditions. And the reality is that we probably should be paying more for our delivery because, Amazon is able to subsidize the losses it makes on delivery because it has a hugely profitable cloud computing business. Other companies have to compete with Amazon, and they do not have that sort of buffer to pay for those costs. And what it's done is it's made us get used to paying very little for next day delivery, and that realistically has a human cost.
I think you have a lot of an optimistic faith in mankind, Alex, because I feel like people know the human cost of this and still want their stuff faster than now. I want it before I've clicked buy. But the interesting point that you make is that this isn't even a big moneymaker for them, right? Why do they continue to do it? Is this all part of Bezos' plan to sort of gain future profits?
No, I think the assumption is that if they become dominant and the only player in the space, I think one of my colleague Lionel, or our colleague Lionel Laurent wrote the other day that, Amazon moving from becoming the everything store to the only store, if they're able to squeeze people out, ultimately there comes a point where they can ratchet prices up and they have such control over the marketplace to do so. But ultimately, Amazon's a company that chases growth and not profit.
Yeah. Okay, listen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Bloomberg's opinion columnist, Alex Webb. You can read more of his stories and many others on Bloomberg Opinion. Just type OPIN GO. He's got great stories out, not just about Amazon, but about the whole work from home issue, video conferencing, meal kits, and the like. So thank you so much to Alex for joining us. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Tottenham chairman Daniel Levy has announced salaries for non-playing staff are being cut due to the coronavirus pandemic. It comes as the soccer club separately disclosed his pay package more than doubled to £7 million last year. The corporate filing of the 2018-19 club's annual report came as Tottenham grapples with the economic fallout of the English Premier League being halted in an effort to contain COVID-19. That has led Tottenham to follow Barcelona and Juventus in trying to reduce the wage bill, including of the club's leadership. Levy says to protect jobs, pay for all 550 non-playing directors and employees is being reduced by 20% for April and May. Meanwhile, FIFA is said to be planning to tap its $2.7 billion cash reserve for an emergency fund to support the soccer industry during the virus crisis. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
You knew the risks when you decided to drive drunk. There could be a crash. People could get hurt or killed. But that didn't stop you, did it? You knew you could get arrested. You could incur huge legal expenses, and you could possibly even lose your job. You were well aware of the consequences of driving drunk. But one thing's for sure. You were wrong when you said it was no big deal. Drive sober or get pulled over. This message brought to you by NHTSA.
Hey, y'all. This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
From home offices to shared workspaces, however you work, at Starling Bank, we'll help you to keep your business flying. With easy integrations that connect your banking with your accounting software, your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank, helping business fly.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you, I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with our Washington correspondent about the many political battles being waged in the Capitol over how to deal with the new coronavirus.
You couldn't imagine a president personalizing a crisis with a virus, but somehow that's where we are.
Susan Glasser. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller, and you're listening to Daybreak Europe.
And it's 9:30 a.m. here in London. Good morning, I'm Caroline Hepker. Let me take you to the markets then. What are we looking at this morning, Matt?
Yeah, basically losses across European equity indexes after a rough session in Asia overnight. It seems that a reassessment in the U.S. downwards in terms of the death toll, or upwards in terms of the death toll, downwards in terms of sentiment, has really hit markets hard. Officials there are now saying 240,000 people could die in total. As a result, U.S. stocks fell, Asian stocks fell, European stocks are down right now 3% or more in some cases, almost 4% on the FTSE, down to 54.20. The DAX currently down 3.2% to 95.92. And U.S. futures are down as well. We're looking at a drop of 3% on U.S. futures. The Dow minis are down 3.2%. S&P 500 minis down 3.3%, etc. So in terms of risk indicators, assets that we use to see how risky investors think markets are, the 10-year yield is down 62.22 in terms of what you pay to the U.S. government for treasuries. The bonds are trading at negative 49 basis points and gilts at 32 positive right now. You can buy less than 108 yen for your dollar. So the greenback gaining strength to 107.6888. Maybe that's good luck. And the euro down 109.39. The pound trading at 123.44.
Okay, so those are the markets. All right, let's get an update in terms of what is happening with the spread of the virus as we see cases increase. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans with all the latest in world news. Good morning, Leanne.
Caroline, good morning. As the number of coronavirus cases globally continues to rise, with the latest Johns Hopkins tally recording nearly 860,000 infections and more than 42,000 deaths. Let's turn to Italy, where the number of new coronavirus cases leveled off, hitting a 2-week low. An official says the nation has reached a plateau. It's a sign the outbreak in Europe's epicenter may finally be coming under control. But Spain suffered its deadliest day yet, as well as a record number of deaths in France and here in the UK. Now, top officials in the UK accept the country hasn't done enough to test for coronavirus. The Prime Minister's team is blaming a shortage of chemical components, and experts are struggling to agree on what to do next. Meanwhile, the UK Health Department says the first new ventilators will be delivered to the NHS at the weekend. South Africa's coronavirus cases have risen to over 1,350 with 5 deaths as the country enters its 6th day under a national lockdown. Bloomberg's Amo Mbata says virus infections may be lower than projected, and that's according to the country's health minister.
Government had initially expected the tally of confirmed cases to reach between 4,000 and 5,000 by the end of April. But the tally will probably undershoot that margin as the various measures undertaken to curb the spread of the disease begin to reduce the rate of internal transmission. In Johannesburg, I'm Khalang Bata, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Denis Potchenko, the doctor who last week gave Russian President Vladimir Putin a tour of Moscow's main coronavirus hospital, has been diagnosed with the illness. Bloomberg's Jake Renitsky has more.
Putin, who wasn't wearing any protective gear when he met and shook hands with Poroshenko, is regularly tested and is fine, according to a Kremlin spokesman. Poroshenko has been the face of Moscow's battle with coronavirus for many Russians, thanks to his regular social media posts. In the weeks since his meeting with Putin, Moscow has gone on lockdown. In Moscow, Jake Rudnitsky, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with all the world news. Well, one major side effect of the coronavirus pandemic has been the sudden shift in companies moving to platforms that facilitate remote working. As a result, digital workplace platform Slack has seen its revenue increase 57% year over year. This as simultaneously connected users increased to 12.5 million on the 25th of March. That's up from 10 million on the 10th of March. And I'm pleased to say that joining us today is Slack's UK head, that's Stuart Templeton. A warm welcome to the programme, Stuart. Thank you for joining us. Look, these your app and others work offering services for free and then converting free customers to paying ones. How are you doing on that score?
I think the first thing to note, Caroline, is our product, our free product, is available in perpetuity, and of our 12 million daily active users, a good chunk of those, around 50%, are still using the free product and will continue to do so and get value. Mm-hmm. We are very proud, of course, that as customers mature in their usage, they do get increased value and do see the upside, I guess, in purchasing for it. And in the UK, we've got 40% or over 40% of the FTSE 100 already paying Slack customers. And those include organisations like Vodafone, like Deliveroo, BBC, Marks and Spencer, etc. I hope that answers your question.
I'd say my wife works at a company that uses Slack, and she spends her whole day on it. Absolutely loves the experience, and I think this pandemic, sending all of their workers home, this is a global company, has made them realize there's no reason for them to pay leases in all of these cities. They can just stay the way they are. Do you think a lot of companies are going to do that post-coronavirus, just stay working from home?
It's a really interesting time, Matt. I think we need to recognise that we are doing more than working at home at the moment, though. I guess for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're all doing it suddenly, and hence it's a big cultural challenge for organisations to overcome. But we're not just working from home, we're teaching our children, we are juggling care for our loved ones and all of those sorts of things. So I do think it's a more unique time than that, Matt. And I think in this time we need to ensure that we're connecting with our employees. Even before this, 76% of workers wanted to be more connected to leadership, and 80% wanted to be more connected to each other. And I think now, even more than before, that's increasingly important, and we need to make time for that. Will there be a long-term shift? Yes, I think there will. But equally, I think different people need different things. Extroverts get energy from people, and hence, to a large extent, some office interaction for those individuals will be really valuable. But equally, we've seen over recent years introverts really embracing technologies like Slack, because it gives them the time to really think about what they want to say and input into conversations. And I dare say that the more introverted amongst the workforce today are being hyper-productive at the moment when they're not caring for their loved ones in what's, of course, a very difficult time.
Yeah, a very difficult time, yes. And all the kids are using all of these apps too, because all of the teaching is going on online, I say, with some knowledge and experience. But on the point around the usage, bandwidth, obviously quite techie, but it's a key issue because it's something that I think has been pretty much ignored, really, or largely ignored. How important do you think it is in terms of kind of maximising the efficiency of Slack and of these other applications? Because everybody, as you say, suddenly wants this, and we're all using Wi-Fi and mobile networks all at the same time, and that in and of itself is risky.
Yeah, we're very much aware of the sense of purpose that perhaps we have more today than we did even a few weeks ago. And organisations, large and small, rely on Slack to get their best work done and to connect to each other in what is increasingly a remote environment. And we're very proud of the performance and the availability that we've been able to achieve, and will continue, of course, to work day and night to ensure that we're there for our customers. Personally, I've experienced very little issues with with any technology today. We're doing a lot of things to try to stay more connected as a UK organisation, virtual calls, virtual happy hours, all those sorts of things. And I've been thoroughly impressed about how things have held together across all sorts of technologies, actually.
Yeah, no, I think I'm surprised by how well it's worked. Also, I took out, Matt, 2 internet boxes just to be sure that we would have, the Wi-Fi capability as we moved to work from home. And actually, we didn't really need to do that.
Yeah, I keep expecting the network to break down, but it's not. To be honest, it's not even slowing, and I play a lot of video games. So, any moment of the day or night. Stuart, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. My wife's going to be thrilled that I talked to the head of Slack in the UK, Stuart Templeton. Really, I think a technology that is sweeping the business world and has been for some time. When we come back, we're going to talk to Jane Foley about King Dollar. She's the head of FX strategy at Rabobank, and we're seeing the greenback rise again today. Is that a worry? This is Bloomberg.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. It's underway. Cover. Rowan wins.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building.
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with our Washington correspondent about the many political battles being waged in the Capitol over how to deal with the new coronavirus.
You couldn't imagine a president personalizing a crisis with a virus, but somehow that's where we are.
Susan Glasser. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
So we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
The news you need from across the globe on Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us today at 5 a.m. on Bloomberg Daybreak.
We have the very latest on the spread of the coronavirus and its effect on the markets.
And we'll track the next round of stimulus measures with Wendy Schiller of Brown University.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5, followed by Bloomberg Surveillance at 7 on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE SIPC.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's global headquarters in New York. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. New quarter today. The first quarter felt like a lifetime. Worst quarter since 2008. The S&P 500 yesterday ended the quarter down exactly 20%. Today in the United States, we have futures pointing to a lower start as well. The S&P 500 futures down 0.3%. In Europe, all major indices are lower. The FTSE 100 down 4% today. The DAX down 3.75% as well. Some of the big movers I want to bring to you, though, is HSBC and Standard Chartered. Both of those stocks down more than 8% this morning. This comes as they halting their dividend, halting their share buybacks. They are being urged by the regulators to do this. The theory is hold on to the cash as we are dealing with the impact of the pandemic on the economy. Treasuries this morning climbing a bit. Yield now trading on the 10-year 0.619%, down 5 basis points. In terms of foreign exchange this morning, the Bloomberg Dollar Index up 0.7%. The euro this morning trading 1.09, and for my friends in London on the British pound, we are trading 123.58. It's down 0.5% against the U.S. dollar. And oil this morning, WTI crude trading $20 a barrel and 18 cents. We are going into a second quarter with serious demand destruction. At the same time, we're having a full-out price war with ample supply in the market. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash, and here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Anne-Marie, good morning. In Italy, the number of new coronavirus cases has leveled off, hitting a 2-week low. But a mystery remains as to how a country with 16 million people has had more deaths than any other nation in the world. The Italian Health Ministry says one possible answer lies in the low flu deaths in 2019 and 2020. Before the coronavirus outbreak, flu mortality among the elderly was below average, which made that group more vulnerable when the current pandemic did hit. Here in the UK, 70 pregnant women and mothers will be released from prison early to combat the coronavirus crisis. The Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, has given the plan the green light. The women are to be released within days after checks to ensure they do not pose a risk of harm to the public. And confirmation the Wimbledon Championships will be cancelled for the first time since the Second World War is indeed expected later today. The All England Club are in emergency meetings to discuss their response to the coronavirus pandemic. The competition is due to run for 2 weeks from the 29th of June. The entire grass court tennis season is now likely to be abandoned. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thanks very much. Leanne Garens there with your world and national news. Now let's get over to Washington, D.C. Actually, I don't want to tell listeners where you live, Nathan, but I'm guessing
don't over-disclose,
a suburb. Nathan Hager joining us from
Washington area.
Exactly, from Delmarva, somewhere in Delmarva.
Thank you.
And you've got Bloomberg Daybreak coming up. What do you got planned?
Well, we have just wrapped up the worst quarter for stocks since the last financial crisis, and now we're shaping up for even more losses as we open up Q2 with the worst potentially still to come from the coronavirus pandemic. It has been really remarkable to see the shifting message from President Trump, going from optimism just a few days ago now to saying that these could be the worst couple of weeks that the U.S. needs to brace for. We're going to bring you the latest projections that have just been disclosed from the White House and look to the market reaction with Seema Shah of Principal Global. We also have Andy Pekosh of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health back with us to get his insights on how we can flatten the curve of infection in this country at this stage of the outbreak. And we will look at the president's leadership and evolving reaction to this crisis. Brown University Political Science Chair Wendy Schiller is back with me and Karen Moscow, broadcasting from our respective home offices this morning, and hope you'll join us here on Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt?
Very, very cool. You know, I used to work in the U.S., and I always loved talking to Wendy Schiller. Now I always love listening to her, so it's great that you guys have her on. Very smart woman, and important points to make during this crisis. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, you will hear that dynamic duo. If you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, an entirely different duo. Bloomberg Surveillance is what you're going to hear. Of course, the Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix.
Indeed. In the meantime, let's get to a conversation about the markets, because investors continue to pile into the relative safety of the US dollar as America braces for tough weeks ahead amid the coronavirus crisis. For more, let's bring in Jane Foley, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. Jane, you argue that dollar weakness could lie ahead, but for now, investors are keen to stick with the greenback that continues today.
I think that's exactly true, and I think as long as there are concerns about the global economy, I think the dollar is going to remain quite favoured. And I think this is a trend that we don't have to just look over the last couple of weeks or the last month. I think we can look back really over the last couple of years, and we've seen dollar strength coming through from really the beginning of 2018, and I think in that trend in 2018 lies, I think, the writing on the wall why the dollar has become so popular during the context of this crisis. And I think there was one very interesting trend that was really developing in 2018, and that was the trend between emerging market stocks, so an index like the MSCI Emerging Market Index, and the dollar. And what we would see is in periods of strength in emerging market stocks, the dollar would be lower, and vice versa. So when there was money flowing out of EM, it tended to move into the dollar. Now, it is my view, it's been my view for a while, that the development of emerging markets over the last decade, maybe the last 20 years, has been instrumental in really changing the demographic in terms of dollar demand. Who needs the dollar? Why do people need the dollar? It's real growth as a transactional currency. And I think it's that factor, the fact that the dollar is so important to so many people for transactional reasons, is why we've had this dollar strength over the last month or so. And I think as long as the market is concerned about the economic impact of this crisis, and of course that could be quite a long time, I think the dollar is going to retain some strength. Now, clearly the Fed has done a lot to try and contain those fears, and clearly that it is fighting fire. But I think, generally speaking, the dollar is going to retain a strong tone for a while.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I mean, Jane, clearly there are other currencies that could vie for the title of at least, number 2 world currency, would like to be at least in that competition. What would happen if, just imagine, the U.S. decided to all of a sudden pay out, half of its GDP in stimulus? I mean, does it matter at all if we pass a $2 trillion stimulus bill, if we've got another $2 trillion infrastructure bill waiting in the wings? I mean, if the U.S. just prints money, in an unfettered way and showers it around the country from helicopters, does that matter?
Of course it matters, and I think it's, of course, the US is the biggest economy, it matters the most, but we've also seen a huge amount of stimulus elsewhere. I mean, look at Japan. We had the Prime Minister Abe again talking today about the boldest ever stimulus plan. So a lot of stimulus from elsewhere, and of course that calms nerves, and particularly with respect to the Fed as well, what the Fed is doing in terms of its swap lines, in terms of the new facility, the FEMA facility it announced yesterday. Yes, that calms nerves, and it will mean to many people that there is more reassurance that they will have the dollars that they need. But I think that until we can get a firm grip on the depth and the length of this economic downturn that we're all facing, I think there's going to be a heightened state of anxiety from many, many businesses around the globe. And I think in those sorts of circumstances, I think there's still going to be a demand for the dollars. But yes, you're right. In terms of what is being done, it does help calm those nerves.
Okay, I want to talk also about the UK. A month ago, there was only one British person who had died from coronavirus. Obviously, we know the story now is very different today. And I draw the parallel with the US, a couple of weeks where it's going to be very, very tough, according to the US president. Where does it leave sterling? Are we going to get kind of wrong-footed again, perhaps, in the coming weeks?
I think for sterling, I think we had a quite an interesting lesson over the last 2 weeks or so. When sterling was really plummeting against the dollar, it was also plummeting against the euro, and I think that was quite an interesting sign. And I think in that situation, I think sterling was really falling foul of the fact that the UK runs a current account deficit. Now, I've always argued that a current account deficit, whilst the textbooks would say it's a currency negative factor, I would say it's only ever a potential currency negative factor if investors don't really want to fund it. And I think we've got to look through at the underlying fundamentals of a country to determine whether or not investors want to carry on funding that deficit. And if we look at the fundamentals of the UK, yes, we had initially at the beginning of the crisis a lot of criticism that the UK government was slow to act. They picked up, but they're still getting criticism now that they were very slow and are still very slow to test. We've got a Prime Minister that was sick, various other ministers that were sick also. And interestingly, when we had the Fitch downgrade on Friday, Fitch also referred not just to the coronavirus impact, but also to the Brexit effect. Now, that's a word that we haven't been speaking a lot about over the last month, but it is there. And certainly from investors' point of view, there is still this threat about what's going to happen on the 1st of January next year. If Boris is not going to extend the intermediate phase, then are we going to have real, shortages of food and other...
A big question, isn't it? Jane,
hopefully stays healthy. Jane, thanks so much. Jane Foley there, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. She's going on surveillance next. This is Bloomberg.
From cafes by the sea to restaurants in the city, at Starling Bank, we'll help you keep your business flying high. With flexible overdrafts of up to £150,000, we'll get your cash flow running smoothly. Your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank. Helping business fly.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks tumble as the outlook for the coronavirus outbreak looks increasingly grim.
We're going through the worst thing that the country's probably ever seen.
Deaths in the U.S. climbed to 3,800, while one study predicts 240,000 total fatalities from the virus.
New York City has passed the 1,000 death toll from COVID-19. Plus, Joe Biden doubts the Democratic National Convention will happen as planned. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. NFL owners have approved expanded playoffs starting in 2020, and tennis's Patrick McEnroe has tested positive for coronavirus.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are falling as the outlook for the coronavirus pandemic worsens. It is coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 74 points. Dow futures down 612. NASDAQ futures down 193. The DAX in Germany is down 3.1%. CAC in Paris down 3.5%. FTSE 100 down 3.8%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 4.5%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 2.2%. 10-year Treasury up 16/30 seconds, yield 0.61%. Yield on the 2-year 0.23%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.5% on 28 cents at $20.20 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $9.20 at $16.0580 an ounce. The euro 1.0955 against the dollar. The yen at 107.48. Nathan.
Karen, the tone from President Trump when it comes to the fallout from the coronavirus is increasingly grim.
This could be a hell of a bad 2 weeks. This is going to be a very bad 2 and maybe even 3 weeks. This is going to be 3 weeks like we haven't seen before.
The president says the reality of the pandemic is shocking after the latest projections for the scope of death and suffering across the country.
This is really easy to be negative about, but I want to give people hope too. You know, I'm a cheerleader for the country. We're going through the worst thing that the country's probably ever seen.
The latest projection from the University of Washington predicts the death toll will spike to almost 60,000 in April. Fatalities will then plateau in May and June, eventually totaling about 84,000 by August.
Some figures from public health officials are even more dire. One White House projection puts total deaths from the virus at 240,000. The base case, however, is a little less pessimistic. Deborah Birx is the top health official coordinating the virus response.
100,000 to 200,000. We think that is the range. We really believe and hope every day that we can do a lot better than that.
The projection calls for U.S. deaths to peak April 15th, 2 weeks from now. At that stage, 2,200 Americans are expected to die each day.
Infections continue to surge across the country with 187,000 confirmed cases and 3,800 fatalities. For the very latest, we bring in Bloomberg's John Tucker live in New York. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. Deaths in New York City have now topped 1,000. New York State accounts for 40% of all infections, with more than 75,000. And Governor Andrew Cuomo says the peak is still likely weeks away.
It is not going to be soon. If our apex is 14 to 21 days, that's our apex. You then have to come down the other side of the mountain once you hit the apex. So calibrate yourself and your expectations so you're not disappointed every morning you get up.
Cases in New York State now exceed the total number in Hubei province where the virus began. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Worldwide, confirmed cases number more than 860,000, with the death toll exceeding 42,000. Fatalities continue to climb across Europe. And here with the very latest is Bloomberg's Ewan Potts, live from our London bureau. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. Here in the UK, the number of confirmed coronavirus-related deaths is now close to 1,800, a one-day jump of more than 380. Top officials now accept Britain has not done enough to test the population, and in particular to test medical workers. Over in France, almost 500 deaths reported yesterday, bringing the total there to more than 3,500. Spain, meanwhile, suffered its deadliest day of the pandemic, with almost 850 deaths in a 24-hour period. But better news from the epicenter of the virus in Europe. New cases in Italy have levelled off at a 2-week low. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ewan, thank you. Meantime, in Asia, the virus continues to linger. South Korea is reporting 100 new cases. Infections in Japan are also on the rise. And a second wave of cases in Hong Kong has that city closing entertainment venues. Those concerns help push stocks in Asia lower overnight. And joining us now with details is Bloomberg's Juliet Sally in Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Japan's Nikkei 225 closed lower by 4.5% in Tokyo as the latest Tankan survey showed confidence that Japan's biggest companies plunged in March. South Korea's Kospi index fell almost 4% in Seoul, data showing exports stalled in March as the pandemic hit supply chains and suppressed global demand. In Hong Kong, shares in UK banks HSBC and Standard Chartered tumbled after they scrapped dividend payments. In Singapore, Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. And those scrap dividend payments have banks leading declines for stocks in Europe today. We get more on the fallout now from Bloomberg's Brian Curtis.
HSBC warned that revenue and loan losses would be impaired in the first quarter. It canceled an interim dividend slated for the end of this month. No payouts or any buybacks, it said, until at least the end of this year. Other banks followed suit after being urged to do so by UK regulators. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Brian. Oil is trading near $20 a barrel as demand is expected to plummet even further this month. We spoke with Goldman Sachs head of commodities research Jeff Curry. He says the unprecedented drop in demand could cripple the industry for years.
96% of the world's GDP currently has some type of social distancing measure in place. The impact in oil is far greater than the economic impact because oil is the cornerstone of social interactions and globalization.
Curry expects consumption this month to plummet as much as 22 million barrels per day. And checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate crude is trading at $20.15 a barrel. S&P futures are lower by 71 points. Dow futures down 602. NASDAQ futures lower by 186 points. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. At 5:07 on Wall Street, we bring in Michael Barr for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Hard hit New York City is parking refrigerated morgue trucks on the streets to collect the dead as it battles the coronavirus. The death toll in the city has passed 1,000. New York is setting up hospitals at convention centers and sports complexes and bringing in medical workers. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says they still need coordinated help to secure enough life-saving ventilators.
So you have 50 states competing to buy the same item. We all wind up bidding up each other and competing against each other, where you now literally will have a company call you up and say, well, California just outbid you. It's like being on eBay.
An Amazon worker in New York City says he was fired for what he calls retaliation for staging an employee walkout over coronavirus concerns. Mayor Bill de Blasio says that employee's termination has become an issue of great concern.
The allegation is because he spoke up for the safety of his fellow workers, he was fired. I have ordered the city's Commission on Human Rights to investigate Amazon immediately to determine if that's true. If so, that would be a violation of our city human rights law. We would act on it immediately.
An Amazon spokesperson says the worker was fired for violating safety procedures by not following company's social distancing guidelines, and he had received multiple warnings. A Southern California nursing home has been slammed by COVID-19. San Bernardino County authorities say 51 residents and 6 staff members of a Yucaipa nursing home had the virus and 2 residents have died. California has at least 8,200 cases and 173 deaths. Former Vice President Joe Biden says he doubts the Democratic National Convention will take place as planned this July in Milwaukee because of the coronavirus outbreak. The Democratic presidential frontrunner spoke to MSNBC.
We should listen to the scientists. And, one of the reasons why the Democratic convention was going to be held early was the Olympics were coming after the Republican convention. There is more time now.
The Democratic National Committee has been exploring contingency options for the convention, which was scheduled for July 13th through the 16th, but has not made any final decisions. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Let's get the Bloomberg Sports Update now live with John Stashower. Good morning, John.
All right, good morning, Nathan. The NFL Draft is one thing that is still on. It's going to start 3 weeks from tomorrow without all the fanfare. Giants have the 4th pick. Their GM, Dave Gettleman, will presumably make the decision, but reportedly Gettleman could be going into his final year on the job if the Giants don't show significant improvement in 2020. They have the NFL's worst record over the last 3 years. They just made a coaching change. GM could be the next to go. NFL owners this week would have been having their spring meeting at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach. Instead, they had a 32-way conference call. They approved expanding the playoffs to 14 teams starting right away, 2020. So one team in each conference gets a bye now. And there'll be 3 wildcard games in each conference, triple header Saturday, another one Sunday. Patrick McEnroe tested positive for COVID-19. 53-year-old native New Yorker, of course, John's younger brother, former Davis Cup captain, longtime tennis broadcaster. He spoke with TMZ.
There's a lot of people that are having a hard time, and unfortunately we're seeing the numbers go up of, people that have lost their lives. So I consider myself extremely lucky, but I also consider myself probably a similar situation to what most people are going through. Okay, which is that you get it, you have some mild symptoms, and your body's able to successfully fight it off. So that's what I've been able to do.
McEnroe's been self-quarantined at his home in Westchester the past 10 days. After Kevin Durant and 3 Nets teammates tested positive, the Lakers all got tested. They were the last team the Nets played. There was a report that 2 Lakers tested positive. Lakers now say all their players are symptom-free. They were quarantined for 2 weeks. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thanks. And other news sources tell us sports streaming startup DAZN is telling leagues it's not going to pay them for any games that have been canceled because of the coronavirus shutdowns. The decision marks a controversial break from tradition. DAZN has committed billions to baseball and football, and leagues rely heavily on money from broadcasters. They've been able to lean on their media partners in the past during stoppages in play. Futures pointing to a sharply lower open to the second quarter. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
This week at Tesco, large Easter eggs are 3 for £8. And we've got a large choice too on all your favourite brands, including Terry's Chocolate Orange, Cadbury's and Maltesers. At 3 for £8, why shell out more? Tesco. Every little helps. Available in the majority of larger stores and online. Delivery charges may apply until 13th of April.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with our Washington correspondent about the many political battles being waged in the Capitol over how to deal with the new coronavirus.
You couldn't imagine a president personalizing a crisis with a virus, but somehow that's where we are.
Susan Glasser. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Aslinda Amin.
Let's bring in Manpower Minister Josephine Teo. Minister Teo, what kind of job losses are you looking at this year, bearing in mind that a recession is looming?
If our measures work, we certainly hope to minimize retrenchments. If you look at the way in which our budgets have been packaged, a lot of the help goes towards the employers, and we have a long-standing philosophy where what we really want to do is rally everyone together. Instead of cutting jobs to save costs, really we should be cutting costs to save jobs.
Are foreign workers at risk? I mean, some companies are worried that they won't be able to hire enough foreign workers.
Well, we are in a rather unusual situation because so what we are noticing is that whereas in a normal year you might have more cancellations of work passes on a regular basis, I think companies are re-evaluating their position. Instead of asking their existing employees to go, whether they are local or they are foreign, they might implement measures to try and keep these workers for a bit longer until the situation stabilizes and they have a better sense of what to expect.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are falling in Europe and Asia, along with U.S. stock index futures, as investors took in worsening coronavirus figures from the U.S. and assessed the impact of the pandemic on corporate profits and dividends. The dollar is climbing along with treasuries. Banks are leading the decline in the Stocks Europe 600 index after lenders including HSBC Holdings and Standard Chartered halted dividends and share buybacks. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 77 points. Dow futures down 650. NASDAQ futures down 210. The DAX in Germany is down 3.25%. 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds. Yield 0.61%. The yield on the 2-year 0.23%. 30-year yield 1.28%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.4% or 29 cents at $20.19 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or $9 to $16.0550 an ounce. The euro 1.0929 against the dollar. British pound 1.2356 and the yen 107.59. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Donald Trump is urging Americans to heed his administration's guidelines for responding to the coronavirus pandemic, calling it a matter of life and death. That includes social distancing. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more on the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, Michael, New York City's death toll topped 1,000. New York State's infections now exceed those reported in China's Hubei province, where the virus first emerged late last year. And Deborah Birx, the top public health official coordinating the White House Coronavirus Task Force, says as many as 200,000 Americans are projected to die in the outbreak. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you, sir. One of the world's busiest airports has lost more than half of its traffic because of the virus outbreak. Airport officials say Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International flights are down by about 60%. The airport usually handles about 2,700 flights per day. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, we're coming up to 5:20 on Wall Street now, Michael, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and Seema Shah joins us on this first day of the second quarter, chief strategist at Principal Global Investors. Seema, you just heard the worsening outlook on how the coronavirus pandemic could play out in this country. We're seeing the effect in markets this morning, sharply lower futures contracts as we open this second quarter. Does this worsening outlook change your outlook for markets?
Hi, Nathan. I don't think it changes our outlook. I think although we think peak panic has probably been reached, given all the health from monetary policymakers, we still think that the market should remain focused on those daily infection rates. And as we continue to see those rise, the market is going to struggle to find a very stable floor.
Do you see the market testing the lows that it's already hit as this has played out? Does the market go down lower?
Well, I think typically when you look at previous bear markets, they do tend to retest their lows a couple of times before they find the clear trough. Now, I would think that there's so much still uncertain. We still haven't seen the clear downgrade of earnings that we would anticipate. We still have to see the worsening economic data. So there's still a lot of bad news to come. But I do hasten to add that the panicky conditions that we were experiencing a couple of weeks ago seem to have passed. Volatility should start to be a little bit lower than what we were seeing. So these are all positive signs, but unfortunately it does mean that probably markets have a little bit further to go before they find their floor.
How much further do you think they do have to go, and when do you think they hit that floor?
Unfortunately, I think those questions are very, very difficult to answer. At the best of times, these are difficult. But given how much is uncertain about how long this outbreak is going to continue for, that's going to be the key factor which is controlling and directing how markets move. And until we have a clear idea of when those cases are going to peak, I think it's difficult to say. I would say, though, that with given the experience that we're seeing in Italy and Spain, with a number of deaths starting to peak, maybe we could hope that the UK, Europe, US, that they're all about 4 or 5 weeks away from that peak. So there's still a lot further to go, unfortunately.
Are you seeing the stimulus, the $2.2 trillion measure just passed, having its intended effect at this point, or does it still have to play out?
With fiscal policy, it does typically take a little while to play out. We still need to see their households starting to receive a lot of those handouts, businesses being able to actually receive the loans that they were hoping for. I think it does help with market sentiment to see fiscal policymakers being so active and introducing such a large size. But I think that for the US, we may see them trying to pivot to protecting workers staying within employment, because that's going to be key for any kind of recovery, is to make sure that unemployment does not spike as much as some people are anticipating. And that will help workers, businesses get back on their feet running once containment measures are lifted.
Does the discussion of an infrastructure package, a $2 trillion infrastructure package that the president was talking about yesterday, is that something that points in the right direction for you?
I think it does, because it tells us that there will be some increase in employment, once this infrastructure package does come in. But I think there's a lot to play out here. So again, we need to make sure that there is consumer caution starts to fade, so that people start to feel confident enough to start going out once you have those containment measures lifted. As you said, the factor on infrastructure would certainly help. And we just need to make sure that all those small and medium-sized businesses are not having to get rid of their employees. You want to see a situation where productive capacity for the U.S. economy and certainly the global economy is not being destroyed through this pandemic.
What do you think it's going to take to get to the V-shaped recovery that so many economists are hoping to see here? Do you see that as a possibility at this point?
I think it is a possibility, and I think there have been really hopeful signs because, as I'm saying, it does seem that fiscal policymakers are starting to pivot to look to try and protect workers from, helping them to stay within their jobs. And that's going to be key to helping this be a V-shaped recovery. But we have to be honest here, it does look less and less likely that day by day that a V-shaped recovery is your most likely scenario. But whenever it happens, we do need there to be less firms going bankrupt. We need to have less workers losing their jobs. And that's going to be your quickest way to getting that V-shaped recovery.
Thanks so much for this, Seema. Good talking with you this morning. Seema Shah is Chief Strategist at Principal Global Investors. Starting off the second quarter following one of the worst quarters for stocks in recent memory. Looks like more losses as we open up Q2. S&P futures are lower now by 77 points. Dow futures down 634. NASDAQ futures a drop of 204 points. DAX in Germany down 3.2%. The CAC in Paris down almost 4% now. 10-year up 16/30 seconds. Yield 0.61%. Yield on a 2-year Treasury note 0.23%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock futures are pointing to a significant drop at the open this morning, faced with staggering projections that as many as 240,000 Americans will die from coronavirus. President Donald Trump largely abandoned his optimistic tone yesterday, telling the U.S. to brace for one of its toughest stretches as a nation. The Dow just posted its worst quarter since 2008, tumbling 23%. The S&P is down 20%, the NASDAQ down 14%. Crude oil prices are down almost 67% this year, the biggest quarterly loss on record. President Donald Trump has dusted off an early policy from his time in office, calling on Congress to approve $2 trillion for infrastructure spending in order to create jobs at a time when many workers are being let go. The president is also set to announce a 90-day deferral of certain tariff payments by some businesses. Dow futures down more than 600 points this morning. Overseas markets are also tumbling this morning. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
This is the sound of diarrhea flushing your day away. Don't let it ruin your day and leave you feeling drained from dehydration. Diaurolite is scientifically proven to help you recover from dehydration faster and better than with water alone. So don't forget your Diaurolite today. Available at your local pharmacy or supermarket. Always read the label.
At Dell, when we created the new XPS 13 laptop, we treated every little piece like it was everything. We crafted every part as if it were the most important thing we'd ever made. The result? Something you'll have to see to believe. Pity this is radio. See the new award-winning Dell XPS 13 at dell.co.uk. Every little thing is everything.
This
This week at Tesco, large Easter eggs are 3 for £8. And we've got a large choice too on all your favourite brands, including Terry's Chocolate Orange, Cadbury's and Maltesers. At 3 for £8, why shell out more? Tesco. Every little helps. Available in the majority of larger stores and online. Delivery charges may apply until 13th of April.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. April 1st, 1991, Duke beats Kansas to win their first men's basketball title. Power forward Christian Laettner was named the most outstanding player.
For Laettner. Sees Davis, Woodbury intercepts. Final seconds. Jordan got the jumper. It doesn't matter. Duke has won its first national championship.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are following global stocks lower as the outlook for the coronavirus outbreak looks increasingly grim.
This could be a hell of a bad 2 weeks. This is going to be a very bad 2 and maybe even 3 weeks. This is going to be 3 weeks like we haven't seen before.
The president says the reality of the pandemic is shocking after the latest projections for the scope of death and suffering across the country.
This is really easy to be negative about, but I want to give people hope too. You know, I'm a cheerleader for the country. We're going through the worst thing that the country's probably ever seen.
Predictions on the outbreak are turning more pessimistic. Let's get the latest numbers now live from Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Well, Nathan, White House projection, they puts the total U.S. deaths for the virus at 240,000. The base case, however, a little less dire. Deborah Briggs is the top health official coordinating the virus response.
100,000 to 200,000. We think that is the range. We really believe and hope every day that we can do a lot better than that.
Well, the projection calls for U.S. deaths to peak April 15th, 2 weeks from now. At that stage, 2,200 Americans are expected to die from COVID-19. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Global stocks are tumbling as the pandemic impacts corporate profits and dividends. In Europe, HSBC and Standard Chartered are halting buybacks and dividends. That has banks leading declines for stocks in Europe.
Back here in the U.S., we expect grim data from payroll provider ADP today. Economists forecast a decline of 150,000 private payrolls in March. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Today's ADP report will illustrate the initial impact of the virus outbreak on America's labor market. Based on last week's jobless claims data, we know unemployment, according to some forecasts, could reach 10%, the peak of the last recession. Bloomberg Economics says there's evidence social distancing is especially hard on smaller firms with limited resources, lines of credit, the ability to work at home. Looking ahead, Thursday's jobless claims could match last week's record of more than 3 million. Friday, the government issues its March payroll report. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. S&P futures are down 76 points this morning. Dow futures down 635 and NASDAQ futures down 200. The DAX in Germany is down 3.2%. 10-year Treasury up 18.30 seconds, yield 0.61%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.22%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.25% at $20.22 a barrel. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is back with us with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says coronavirus is more dangerous than officials in his state first thought. Cuomo, during his daily news conference, says that cases are still on the rise, and they don't know when the curve will peak.
If our apex is 14 to 21 days, that's our apex. You then have to come down the other side of the mountain once you hit the apex. So calibrate yourself and your expectations so you're not disappointed every morning you get up.
The death toll from the coronavirus pandemic has surpassed 1,000 in New York City. Meanwhile, the city's overwhelmed health system embraced the arrival of hundreds of paramedics, EMTs, and ambulances. In New Jersey, there are almost 18,700 COVID-19 cases with 267 deaths. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy.
The way we win this war is to break the back of the virus, flatten that curve as aggressively as possible, basically shut the state down, but for essential services, as we have done now for weeks.
Meanwhile, Connecticut has more than 3,100 virus cases with 69 deaths. The nation's top infectious disease doctor says the U.S. needs to keep up social distancing efforts. Dr. Anthony Fauci at the White House says there are two opposing forces, the virus and what we are doing about it.
The 15 days that we had of mitigation clearly have had an effect, although it's tough to quantitate it because of those two opposing forces. But the reason why we feel so strongly about the necessity of the additional 30 days is that now is the time, whenever you're having an effect, not to take your foot off the accelerator.
Joe Biden expressed doubts that the Democratic National Convention could go on as planned this July in Milwaukee, citing continued concerns about containing the coronavirus outbreak. The Democratic National Committee has been exploring contingency options for the convention, but it has not made any final decisions. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time again for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Back to John Stashower. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Nathan. NFL VP Jeff Pash says the league has been told there's no reason to believe their season won't be able to start on time in September. He adds that if it doesn't, the plan would be to still play 16-game schedule and then a 14-team playoff tournament. That's up from 12. NFL owners approved that yesterday. When and if the NBA returns, it's almost certainly going to be without fans, which begs the question, why bother playing at a team's home arena? Reportedly, the league is considering having all the games be played at the same arena with multiple games, perhaps day and night, and thus there'd be no travel for players and officials. Las Vegas has a lot of hotel space that's considered to be the likeliest host. The Chinese Basketball Association shut down in January. Its scheduled return has been delayed. No timetable set. They were to resume play without fans. NFL draft on 3 weeks from tomorrow. It starts. The NBA says it will push back its draft until after the season ends. The Celtics' Marcus Smart, now symptom-free of the virus, says he plans to donate blood so he can be studied with the hope of finding a treatment. Add Patrick McEnroe, the former tennis pro and longtime tennis broadcaster, to the list of those who have tested positive for COVID-19. About a year and a half ago, Tiger Woods played Phil Mickelson for $9 million, winner take all. Phil won. Now Mickelson admits there are talks about another match. He was responding to a tweet that suggested they play and have it streamed. The tweet ended with, "We need sports," and Mickelson responded, "We're looking into it." John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with a cover on 3M's plans to make 1 billion face masks by year's end. Brian Grewley wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
You know, how do you make more of these products yesterday? How does 3M manufacture millions and millions of masks in addition to the ones that they were already doing?
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week. It's on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. And terminal customers, you can get a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or watch it on YouTube. Weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. It is now 5:38 on Wall Street and time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Well, the global pandemic is forcing real estate brokers nationwide to adapt practices heavy on face-to-face interaction to the distance of a computer screen. A couple of condos went into contract this month at 130 William Street, under construction in the financial district, to buyers who relied on virtual showings and never even visited the sales office. Businesses in New York City are pitching in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Brooklyn's Air Company is making hand sanitizer for first responders and medical staff. Lunchbox, a digital ordering platform for restaurants, set up a website that allows people to buy gift cards to support struggling eateries. A record number of people have filed for unemployment claims in New Jersey as COVID-19 has ravaged the economy. The state has launched a new COVID-19 jobs portal to help with the demand. Chief Innovation Officer Beth Novak tells NJ Spotlight the site is still bare bones and a work in progress. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
All right, thank you, Ed. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. Southwest Airlines will offer the first all-cargo flights in its 48-year history.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on Kogo in San Diego, I'm reporting T-Mobile and Sprint may be preparing to close their merger without approval from California's Public Utilities Commission.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WCCO in Minneapolis, I'm talking about 3M working with online sellers and law enforcement to root out price gouging and the selling of counterfeit face masks.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting the automakers are about to give us a taste of how bad things have gotten because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Some other stories we're following. Xerox has dropped its hostile takeover bid for HP. The company says the move is tied to uncertainty stemming from the coronavirus. HP had said before that the $35 billion offer undervalued it. Equity investors just witnessed the worst quarterly plunge since the financial crisis, and some expect more losses ahead. Oak Tree Capital co-founder Howard Marks says the range of negative outcomes right now is wider than the financial crisis. Jeffrey Gunlock of Double Line Capital says the S&P 500 will likely reach new lows this month, and veteran investor Jim Rogers expects the worst bear market in his life over the next few years. Futures are pointing to losses as we open the second quarter. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs, simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. Only leave your home for the following reasons: to shop for basic necessities, to pick up medicine or to provide care to those who need it, to exercise once a day, alone or with members of your household. Only travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home. If you have to go out for any of these reasons, always stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household.